Yes, that's very helpful. Yes.
Okay, relax.
Yeah. Okay. You ready? Ready, guys?
Yeah.
Good evening. I would like to call the August 28th, 2023 New Albany Plain Local Board of Education meeting to order. Mrs. Gerhart, please call the roll.
Mr. McClellan,
Here.
Mr. Darrow,
Here.
Vice President Newmoff,
Here.
President Kalinowski.
Here, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board members had the opportunity to review the minutes from our July 10th, 2023 board meeting. May I have a motion and a second to approve those meeting minutes?
So moved. Second.
Mr. McClellan and Mr. Newmoff. Mrs. Gerhart, please call the roll.
Mr. McClellan,
Yes.
Vice President Newmoff,
Yes.
Mr. Darrow,
Yes.
President Kalinowski.
Yes, and the motion passes. Superintendent Sawyers, are there any additions or corrections to tonight's agenda?
President Kalinowski, members of the board, the cooperative strategy study is being postponed this evening, so please remove it from the agenda.
With that change, may I have a motion and a second to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved. Second.
Mr. Darrow and Mr. Newmoff. Mrs. Gerhart, please call the roll.
Mr. Darrow,
Yes.
Vice President Newmoff,
Yes.
Mr. McClellan,
Yes.
President Kalinowski.
Yes, and the motion passes. Next is an opportunity for public participation, and it looks like we do not have any participants. No. Okay. So we will move on to communications to the board, beginning with a plea update. Ms. Gunlock.
Good evening. My name is Marlene Gunlock, and I am a math intervention specialist at the primary building, and I'm here to share what our staff was up to this summer so they can support kids better. Elizabeth Gonda and Jackie Lockery represented the New Albany English Department, the New Albany High School English Department at the Summer Literacy Institute hosted by the ESC of Central Ohio. They had a full day of intentional literacy conversations and reflections with both national and local experts. Topics of discussion included digital writing, dyslexia, graphic novels, book clubs, morphology, oral language, poetry, text sets, and more. As more students at the high school level require basic literacy instructions, they are building their skills as teachers to help meet their students' needs. Jackie Lockery took 2 graduate courses this summer to help NAHS students strengthen their literacy skills. Trinity University Folger Library's How to Teach Any Play or Novel with Rigor taught how to identify the juiciest parts of a play or novel to get students inside the language and use paired text to give students the sweep of literature from across time, place, culture, gender, race, and religion. Miami University, the Ohio Writing Project's Literacy Interventions course, taught practical classroom strategies and scaffolds for supporting all students in meeting the goals of students needing literacy interventions. It also shared ideas on how to collaborate with colleagues to support learning and teaching for striving students, exploring a variety of structures and strategies for literacy goals and growth through effective literacy interventions and practices. This summer, Steve Spurk attended the AMTA, which is American Modeling Teachers Association, Chemistry Modeling Workshop. This was a 2-week immersive program at Baldwin Wallace. Modeling takes a new approach to chemistry that focuses on the macroscopic or world view first, rather than diving right into the sub-microscopic view. There is a strong focus on inquiry and investigation, followed by a discussion of what was discovered. Mr. Spurk is very excited to join the rest of the chemistry team and deploy this new style of teaching. New Albany intermediate science teachers, Mandy McNamara and Pete Barnes, along with intervention specialist Chris Smith, joined Olentangy science teachers to explore a national park as a follow-up to their 2022 fellowship. This summer, the group stayed closer to home and went to Cuyahoga Valley National Park here in Ohio. The group met with a national park biologist to learn about the reclamation project of a golf course back to natural space, a teacher ranger providing service learning in the parks, and a member of the Cuyahoga Falls Watershed Project working to remove a major dam in Cuyahoga Falls to reopen the Cuyahoga River and improve the watershed flowing into Lake Erie. The group continues to network across districts on curricular work and working to find interactive ways to connect our students to the earth. Connecting our students to the earth and incorporating both community spaces here in New Albany and our national parks helps to build stewardship for the earth, interest in careers in STEM, and encourage lifelong learners as teachers, modeling excitement about learning even during the summer. Carrie Horton co-led a group of 30 adult singers on a trip to perform at a Mozart festival in Salzburg, Austria. After singing in the festival, the group went on to present their own concerts in Sightsee through Slovenia and Croatia. The singers were all from Capriccio, I had to look how to pronounce that, Capriccio, Columbus, and auditioned chorus numbering 70 plus, of which Carrie has served as associate director for 19 years. Thank you for letting me share.
Awesome, thank you. Next on our agenda are superintendent items, beginning with preliminary results of our 2022-2023 report card. Superintendent Sawyer.
President Kalinowski, members of the Board of Education, I'm going to invite Katie Nowak, Director of Assessment and Accountability. She's come to the podium. Katie and I are going to tag team this evening to go through the preliminary results of the 2022-23 report card for data purposes for accountability based upon the continuous improvement plan for last school year, and then preview the draft of the CIP, continuous improvement plan for the 2023-24 school year that we've written for board dialogue that's also on your agenda this evening. So Katie, we're going to start with you, and I will do my best to remember there's a 3-second delay sometimes on the slides if there's a graphic, okay?
Okay. Well, good evening, Superintendent Sawyers, President Kalinowski, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to share tonight about the 22-23 preliminary results of our local report card, as well as our 2022-23 continuous improvement plan progress, and finally proposed benchmarks for the 23-24 continuous improvement plan. Tonight's presentation, of course, will cover our purpose, or is grounded in our purpose, which is, of course, to create a culture of accountability that achieves the best academic and developmental outcomes for each student. Ohio's local report cards. The local report card is an accountability model that highlights academic attendance, graduation, growth, and college readiness. It is intended to help districts measure overall achievement and progress towards meeting and exceeding state standards. The academic measures rely heavily upon the results of the Ohio State tests. The Ohio State tests are only administered to students in grades 3 through 8 and in select high school courses. Although significant legislation surrounds the requirements for achievement testing, it does remain only one source of data that is used by our staff in identifying and analyzing the strengths and areas for improvement for each and every student. You may recall from last school year that beginning with the 21-22 report card, House Bill 82 replaced the A to F letter grade system with a rating system that uses stars to indicate a district or school's overall performance and the individual components. The components are rated 1 to 5 stars, and the overall rating for a school or district is actually going to be rated for the first time with the 22-23 local report card. So you may recall last year we got 5 stars in achievement or 5 stars for progress, but we didn't receive an overall 5-star rating. That is new this year. As part of the onboarding process, they did not give each district an overall rating, but for this school year, we will receive and overall star rating. This next screen shows our district's tentative local report card results. This is kind of on the back side in something called the Secure Data Center. So you can see the preliminary results show our overall rating sitting at 5 stars, the achievement component rating sitting at 5 stars, the graduation rate component rating at 5 stars, and the gap closing component rating also at 5 stars, as well as early literacy 5 stars at the district level. You will notice that the progress component has an NR for not rated. This has not yet been released. This looks at student growth year over year, and we never get this until September. So currently it's not rated. And you'll also notice the college, career, workforce, and military readiness is also not rated. This will not be rated until 2025. So there's report only information available at this time. So owning our results, a little bit more detail for these 5 components. The 5 components are achievement, which provides information on the overall achievement of students, and looking at the performance index only. We have a 5-star rating. Our performance index percentage was greater than 90%, sitting currently at 96.2%. And I'll get into that a little bit more in depth in some coming slides. Our gap closing is currently sitting at 5 stars. There's a slide.
I know.
All of our subgroups in ELA and math have met the state performance index goal. There is one component of gap closing related to progress that has not been released yet, but we're pretty confident that hopefully will remain at 5 stars in that area. As I mentioned, the progress or growth rating will be released in September. The graduation rate continues to be a strong success area for our district at 5 stars, and early literacy, which measures how successful we are at getting struggling readers on track to proficiency between kindergarten and 3rd grade, was also 5 stars for our district. So going a little bit more in depth on the achievement component, as a reminder, the performance index is based on the test results of every student, with points awarded based on the achievement level of each student. The maximum performance index is now established each year by averaging the PI scores achieved by the top 2% of all districts and the top 2% of schools for the school year. Our performance index is 104.655, which is an increase from last year. Last year's PI was 103.311. The max PI this year is 108.806. So when you take your numerator and denominator, we end up at 96.2% for our PI percentage. And since we are higher than 90%, we have a 5-star rating. Jumping ahead to our primary school, as a result, beginning with the 21-22 report card last year, performance indicators are no longer evaluated against a state standard of 80% proficiency and do not receive a met or not met determination. They're for reporting and informational purposes. At New Albany Primary School, a celebration is that our 3rd grade ELA passage rate surpassed pre-pandemic levels at 92.1%. And based on preliminary results, is the highest in Franklin County at this time. Also, our 3rd grade reading guarantee promotion rate to 4th grade was again 100%, which is just awesome. Last school year, you may recall that there was a focus on literacy with 18 hours of professional development as required by the new dyslexia law, which certainly paid off for our ELA passage rate, but also limited time available for focus on math during in-service days. This school year, there will be a rebalancing with focus on math. Principal Smith and her team have already disaggregated their data this summer to identify learning standards for focus in the area of math, which preliminarily looks like we'll be focusing on fractions and geometry to help strengthen that for our students moving forward. Jumping ahead to the intermediate school. At New Albany Intermediate, a couple of celebrations are 5th grade ELA, which increased to a passage rate of 89.2%, and 5th grade science that increased to 88.6%, both surpassing pre-pandemic levels. Principal Ballinger and team have completed a deep dive of their data this summer, identifying learning standards that saw increases within grade level and content areas, as well as areas of focus for this coming school year. In math, content standards related to geometry will be an area of focus, as well as a recalibration of Number Corner, which is part of the Bridges curriculum that spirals learning standards over the course of the year. For ELA statewide, there was a drop in ELA scores for 4th and 6th grades, which we also saw in our data. Principal Ballinger and her team have disaggregated this data to devise an action plan for areas of focus, including writing intervention for struggling students, writing argumentative and informative essays at the 6th grade level, and a focus on informational text at the 4th grade level as well. Going ahead to the middle school, New Albany Middle School increased in all areas. 7th grade math went up from 76.4% to 84.1% passage rate. And 7th grade ELA went up from 85.8% to 92.2%, surpassing their pre-pandemic passage rates. 8th grade science also saw a return to the pre-pandemic passage rate as well, so lots to celebrate at our middle school level. Looking at end of course achievement at the high school, New Albany High School saw an increase in all areas except for one. Algebra 1 and ELA 2 are focal points at the high school level since there are competency score requirements for graduation. Algebra 1 saw an increase of 85.4% passage and ELA 2 increased to 88.5%. Statewide, there was a slight decrease in biology passage rates. Dr. Russell and the science department are in the process of doing a deep dive into the biology data to focus on specific content standards and areas for growth, particularly in the content strand of heredity. The next indicator deals with chronic absenteeism, which is a focus area for our district. Chronic absenteeism measures the percent of students that miss 10% or more in a given school year. That's a state definition. During the pandemic, this area really increased. The state indicator last year was a goal of 22.1%. This year, the state indicator was 20.2%. You can see that our chronic absenteeism rate in the 21-22 school year was 15.3%, dropping to 10.2%. So we did have a reduction of 5.1 points, which is certainly a celebration, but this is a continued area of focus for us as we want to get back to our pre-pandemic chronic absenteeism rate. And this is a focus across the entire state. Myself and Assistant Principal Jennifer Ream at the high school have signed up for the Central Ohio Attendance Network, which is a group that will be meeting monthly from Central Ohio school districts to share resources and ideas to specifically address chronic absenteeism. During our summer retreat, each school as well shared their plans for the year to make connections with students. One strategy that we have put in place is the use of Ada Rodriguez, who is our truancy officer that tracks things like excessive absence and truancy letters. However, we're trying to use her for a more proactive approach, looking at our data early on to make those connections with students and families for ways that we can connect with them. The middle school dean of students is doing weekly attendance checks and met with students that were trending towards excessively absent last year. That's continued for this year. The middle school decreased their chronic absenteeism from 16.8 to 9.7, which is a decrease of 7.1%. Again, going to be a continued focus for this school year. At the high school, the dean of students collaborated with the truancy officer in the technology department to create a workflow that will notify NEST teachers to start a conversation with students that are concerned. Making sure the students know that we see them and are helping them understand the importance of their attendance. Attendance matters. For the 23-24 school year, NAHS is participating in what I just shared with the Central Ohio Attendance Network. And the Dean of Students has continued to collaborate with the technology department to create an enhanced tardy system to better track students. This summer at our leadership retreat, all levels, all 5 buildings were able to look at their chronic absenteeism data, as well as receive a list of students that are moving up to them that were chronically absent this past school year, so we can intervene early by reaching out to students and families to have those proactive discussions. So this will be definitely a continued area of focus for us. Moving to gifted. A celebration in the area of gifted students is that the gifted performance index percent is 100.3. The gifted PI was 120.889 over a max PI of 120.559, which means our district is in the top 2% of all school districts for our gifted performance index, which is absolutely outstanding. Under the gifted inputs, we earned 95 out of 140 possible points for a 67.9%. Under last year's gifted identification and services threshold, we would have met this indicator. However, the newly revised gifted ID and services has an increasing threshold from the 21-22 school year to the 23-24 school year. 70% of possible points was needed to have had met for this particular indicator. As a reminder, the gifted identification and service element was revised as part of the new report card last school year. As part of this calculation, there is now a representation index, which looks at the representation of subgroups such as our economically disadvantaged students and underrepresented minorities. So the representation index is really that ratio between a given student group and the representation in the gifted population in comparison to the representation in the overall student population. So if we have 10% of our students that are economically disadvantaged, the state's hope then is that we would have a similar representation for our gifted students. And so there is a sliding scale of points that you can either earn or not earn in each of these areas for the representation index. And so under last year's threshold, we would have met this indicator, but we did not meet this indicator due to that representation index. And obviously we are in the process of disaggregating this data and meeting with our gifted department. And we're very curious once the report card is released to see what districts may or may not meet this indicator so that we can certainly reach out and collaborate. I think it will be a challenging indicator to meet with the new criteria, but definitely plan to, once those results are released, to collaborate and connect with other districts to see, what they're doing and see if there are practices we need to change for our students. The gifted value added is not yet released. It's not calculated yet because that will fall under progress. So that is a coming attraction for the gifted area as well. So this just again shows our achievement for performance index and shows the 104.655 and the 96.2. Again, this is not officially final until the results are released in September. That's been steadily increasing this summer, but we do believe this is likely our final result at this time.
It hasn't changed in the last 3 weeks, so we think this is probably the number.
The next slide shows just the trends in our performance index over the last few years. So you can again see that last school year we were at 103.311. So we did see an increase in our PI to 104.655. Always want to see that increase, but not yet quite back at pre-pandemic level, which is obviously a continued goal. In the area of gap closing, as a reminder, the gap closing component shows how well we are meeting performance expectations for our subgroups of students in English, language arts, math, for English learners, and as well as graduation. The state calculates a PI for each subgroup and it compares it to a state standard. The state's long-term goal is to show that subgroups of students are increasing in overall performance, and therefore the PI goal for individual subgroups increases each year. For the 22-23 school year, there did need to be 15 students across the district in a specific subgroup in order for it to be reported. And as you can see from the graph, all of our subgroups did exceed the state expectation. While as a district, we met our subgroup goal, obviously there are still specific subgroups that each building has identified to continue to target support and intervention services. And just also as a reminder, under the new report card, the gap closing component now includes quite a few components to this. It has performance thresholds for the gifted performance, chronic absenteeism, English learner proficiency, graduation goal, and academic progress, which is not yet released. Go to math. As a district, all subgroups also met the state expected PI goal for math, which is definitely a celebration. While all subgroups met the state PI goal, there are still subgroups that have a PI lower than the district. So this continues to be an area of focus for building administrators and staff. So again, that orange line is the state goal, and the green colored line is the PI for 22-23. For gap closing and graduation, this continues to remain strong for all subgroups, and again, was met in every area. The last component of gap closing specifically measures how English learners are acquiring the English language. Students identified as English learners annually take the OELPA, the Ohio English Language Proficiency Assessment. There are a couple parts to this component. There's the number of students that met the English proficiency standards and were able to exit EL services. And of the students that did not meet proficiency, it also looks at how many students increased their overall OELPA score. The sum of these two is compared to the overall number of identified students and compared to the state standard. 118 students met proficiency or increased in their overall score, and this was 73.3% met, which far exceeded the state goal of 46.6%. And you will notice the number of EL students there is reported at the top. This continues to be an increasing population for us. The next area is graduation rate. The graduation rate component shows the percent of students who successfully finish high school with a diploma in 4 or 5 years. If a student, however, moves out of state and there is no request for records, that student is then counted as a non-grad. So sometimes we get questioned, well, we have a very high graduation rate. The state average is 87%. We're over 97% here. There is a little gap there because the students move out of state, and that can be counted against us if we don't receive records or if they go out of the country, things of that nature. And so that's important to keep in mind on this particular standard. It's also important to know that this grad collection would actually represent our 21-22 grads. We're still in the process of reporting on last year's graduates, so just kind of because that happens over the summer, it's actually even a year further in the rears. So this would be the 21-22 grads, which obviously had a lot of their high school experience during the pandemic as well. So those are just things to kind of keep in mind. But overall, a very strong indicator for us. Early literacy. So again, celebration for our district is we receive 5 stars in the area of early literacy. The early literacy component measures reading improvement and proficiency for students in kindergarten through 3rd grade. There are 3 factors in this component rating: proficiency in 3rd grade reading, promotion to 4th grade, and improving K-3 literacy. However, schools and districts with less than 10% of students scoring not on track in kindergarten do not have the improving K-3 literacy measure contribute to the overall district component rating. And so you'll notice on this slide, you just see 2 of the 3 components because we have less than 10% of our students for last year that were not on track in kindergarten. So that 3rd component does not get calculated into the district level. You see again that huge celebration of 100% of our 3rd graders going on to 4th grade, and you see that that has 40% weight. And then the 3rd grade ELA proficiency percentage there is 60% of the weight. And so we've achieved a 5-star rating in this area. The next component is the college career workforce and military readiness, which shows how well prepared our students are for their future opportunities. This component replaces the prepared for success area, which was a previous component on the report card, and will not officially be rated until the 2025 report card. They have, however, started to release some of the business rules for how it will be calculated. And so you can see an overview of the calculation there. The number of students in the 4-year graduating cohort that complete at least 1 readiness experience will be divided by the total number of students in the 4-year graduating cohort. The resulting percentage will be the readiness component percentage that is evaluated to assign a component rating. Per state law, this component will not be rated until at least the 2024-2025 school year, and therefore no rating cut scores are available and no rating is assigned. However, there is information available for reporting and informational purposes only. On the next slide, you see what some of these areas are. And I apologize, the bar graph is a little smushed, but that's how it shows in the secure data center. And so this is looking at several areas. One of the areas is ACT, SAT remediation free percentage. So this area did increase based on the reporting element available. In the 21-22 school year, that was 53.5% of our students. This past school year, that was 64.4%. So we saw a nice bump there. Honors diploma is another area that is reported here. In the 21-22 school year, that was sitting at 49.8%, and that increased a little bit to 51.4%. So we are definitely starting to use this information to see how we can better support our students. Some of the other areas on here deal with state licensing and industry credentials. We have recently established a partnership with Lead the Way Learning Academy in addition to Eastland Fairfield. We believe this will help with our pre-apprenticeship and industry credential programs. As an example, 4 students completed their STNA certification and were paid to do it over the summer. So we are definitely looking at opportunities in all of these areas to ensure that our students are ready for their future. We're also looking at increased opportunities for CCP on campus with the potential of an additional math CCP being added to help alleviate the financial literacy state requirements in the future. The next slide is also a reporting area that's available in the SDC. This is looking at our 2- and 4-year college enrollment percentage. ODE obtains this information from the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center. And so you can see, according to this information, 92.4% of our students were enrolled in 2- or 4-year college, which is a pretty high amount. It then breaks that down to 2-year and 4-year enrollment. This is not, my understanding, this is for informational purposes only and will not be part of the actual rating component. However, they also haven't released final business rules yet for this indicator, so we're watching this closely. Forward progress into the 2023-2024 school year. Our student achievement remained high as measured by our performance index. We're proud that all of our subgroups met or exceeded the state PI goal, and by and large, writing scores have continued to increase. Focused areas for this school year are increasing levels of intervention support in reading and writing, continued emphasis of intervention support in math, and we're excited to begin use of a new targeted assessment tool that's aligned to state standards to meet student needs for intervention and enrichment. The state has developed a new assessment authoring system where teachers can go in and create their own assessments that are aligned to state standards and are released Ohio state tests. And they can work collaboratively together on those. And the great news is when you administer those, you get the results in a matter of minutes later. So they can really be used in a timely approach as formative assessment to meet student needs. So a preview of what the local report cards look like at each level at our elementary schools. For the primary school, as a reminder, the primary building only has state test data from the 3rd grade. That's the first year they take their assessment. For the area of achievement, 5-star rating with a PI of 104.223 or a PI percentage of 94.5%. Gifted PI was very high with 119.175 or 98.1%. Gap closing is 5 stars. All subgroups in ELA and math met the goal. You will notice that early literacy is 4 stars at the primary building level. And that goes back to those 3 components. That 3rd component of improving K-3 literacy, which looks at the number of students identified as off track and moved to on track. And that is from kindergarten to 1st, 2nd to 3rd. It's year over year over year. And so in that area, due to the number of students that were moved on track to off track, we had 55.7% of those students. We fell just short, we had this last year too, of the 5-star rating, but overall really, really solid performance in this area for supporting our youngest readers. The intermediate school for achievement also has a 5-star rating with a PI of 105.205 or 95.4%. Gifted also had a very strong performance with a PI of 121.096 or 99.7%, and gap closing rating of 5 stars with 9 out of 9 subgroups being met for ELA and math. Moving on to the middle and high schools. At the middle school, achievement is a 5-star rating with the PI being 106.420, and this is definitely a big celebration. The middle school PI went up from 101.79 to 106.420, which is outstanding. Gifted was at 123.074 or 101%, and gap closing 5 stars, 9 out of 9 subgroups meeting the ELA and math goal, just like we've seen across the board. New Albany High School, also strong performance, achievement at 5-star rating, PI at 102.684 or 93.1%. Gifted PI 118.341 or 97.4%. Gap closing 5-star rating in all subgroups for ELA and math. Graduation also at 5 stars, continuing to be a strong indicator. So again, a lot to celebrate at our high school level.
So we're going to pause here for a minute. I want to make a couple comments, then we'll open it up for questions on Katie's section related to the report cards before we get into benchmarks. But I want to echo some of what Katie shared and just make a couple comments in relationship to it. So first and foremost, the 5-star rating for the school district is a huge celebration. I think we will be one of very few school districts in the state of Ohio that actually will receive the overall 5-star rating. Last year, we were one of 12 school districts that received 5 stars on all components. Out of 607 was last year's number in the state. I suspect will be very similar this year, that we will be one of a few. We don't have access to that data because Debbie and I had this conversation. She asked me that question. We don't get to see everyone else's. It's subject to which districts are willing to share at this point in time. So to some of the things that Katie's found out about specific components, we've gathered that information by calling school districts, talking to the directors, talking to SUPs, talking to assistant SUPs or Katie's counterpart to get information, but we can't see anything in the secure data center at the department right now other than our own data. So we only have access to that. In September, they will release other spreadsheets that will give us access to other school districts. We just don't get to see that yet. But the 5-star rating that's being added this year is the overall quote unquote component for the school district rating, I think is significant. The teachers, the faculty, the staff, and our students and parents as partners in this process clearly demonstrated that we're committed to continuous improvement. Are we back to pre-pandemic? No, but we're making growth. And I think it's important that we stop as a school district to celebrate the fact that we don't manufacture widgets, we educate children. And you have to be careful, and that's one thing I'm going to say, because it's very easy to get into, let's look at the chart and look at year-over-year comparison. You have to remember they're a cohort. You have to follow the 3rd grade to 4th grade, 4th grade to 5th grade to see how they're actually progressing through the school district. You can't just go horizontally because it's different cohorts of kids. So I'm just saying that out loud because it's very easy when you look at the chart, you're like, well, what happened in 3rd grade? It's a different set of students, and you have to go back and look at their history of what's happening with them in the learning cycle within the school district. There's significant performance, as there always has been, in our gifted population. We have very high achieving school districts in our school district, and we're very fortunate for what those gifted students can perform every single day within the school district. But it's stretching them from the enrichment perspective to take them deeper into content. And our teachers do an outstanding job on that daily within the leadership of the buildings to talk about what we're doing in the curriculum work that's occurring in gifted. The caution I would put on the table is also to remember when you look at other students, because there are people that will point this out, there's nothing wrong with a student in our school district that is not gifted. A student that is in curriculum at grade level is perfectly okay and acceptable. They're performing at grade level. That is our goal. Not every student in every school district will ever be classified as gifted. Students are students, and we need to look at them individually and understand what's the learning plan that's necessary for Michael to be successful versus Debbie versus Paul versus John and Phil. We're not the same. It's not a one size fits all. So that's the conscious conversation that's happening at the building level with classroom teachers to look at, in partnership with families, what can we do to help each student grow? We do have a growing population for students with special needs, and we have a growing population for English language learners. And that's important for us to understand because it requires other interventions and supports necessary. Katie mentioned it, and I'm going to point it out deliberately because it impacts all of this. Chronic absenteeism is an issue. Now, although we've made significant strides, and I'm just saying at the secondary level, there's plus or minus 300 students that make up a significant portion of this population called chronic absenteeism that you miss more than the 10%. We're making growth. There was a significant decrease at the middle school level. There was a significant decrease at the high school level. However, when you just look at the number, there's 10.2% of our student population that still represents chronic absenteeism. That's over 500 students in our school district, 300 plus at the secondary level. If you do not come to school, you cannot be successful as much as you probably could be in the classroom. We need you to come to school. And I'm just going to say it out loud because building principals and classroom teachers work on this every single day with our students to help them understand it's important for you to come to school. Unfortunately, I believe, and I don't have all the research memorized to support it, but I can tell you I've read enough journals about it, and some of you have as well, I'm sure, that the pandemic created some bad habits. And several of our secondary students have gotten in some habits that, well, I don't start life till 10 a.m. 10 a.m. is going into fourth period 10 at the high school. We've missed 3 academic classes when you come to school at 10 a.m. That's not good for your learning cycle. There's some habits that have been created, and unfortunately, because of the chronic absenteeism rules and how it's tied to the truancy officer to go through juvenile court, there aren't significant consequences that are necessarily borne upon the parent for allowing your child to be chronically absent from school, because the magistrate's dockets are full. So you're not necessarily going to show up in juvenile court to see the magistrate because your child was absent from school. Not making excuses, but you get a form letter in the mail that says send your kid to school or else. The fines are rare. The parenting class is rare. They exist, but they're rare. We don't have a large part of our parent population that actually gets that consequence. Not that I want people to get it. We need your child to come to school, thus to the examples that Katie specifically called out about what the deans of students are doing with their building admins and classroom teachers to form plans to build relationships with kids to get them to come to school. You can't be successful at school if you're not here. So chronic absenteeism is still an area of focus for us because it impacts everything else associated to academic achievement or student social emotional well-being, the well-being of kids, what's specifically happening in co and extracurricular activities to help them feel like they belong and they're supported and connected at school, and the mental health of kids. So it's a cyclical situation, but we're paying attention to it every day in the school district because it impacts everything else we do on a daily basis called school and educating kids to meet their learning needs. But overall, outstanding results. We're very proud of everything that's been achieved for 2022-23. This won't be official until September, so everything is stamped draft preliminary because it's not official from the state until it's released. Everything's technically embargoed, but we're comfortable enough at this stage that the only thing we don't have is the progress measure finalized to understand the overall growth. But based upon what we've seen in the data in our past history, we're confident we believe it will be 5 stars. So we believe that based upon the data review we've done. Building principals and the directors that are here tonight, there's some classroom teachers, have done outstanding jobs all summer disaggregating this data. We've gone through with a fine-tooth comb. We've identified specific benchmarks. Katie gave you a couple examples, even specific disciplines of areas where the kids did not hit a specific benchmark. So now we're going back and having conversations, and I'll just use biology as an example, with the classroom teachers to understand, was heredity, right? So in the heredity strand for the standard, well, let's talk about that. How was it taught? And if it wasn't taught, clearly we have no evidence because our kids didn't perform there. So let's just talk about that because it's a required standard to understand for the student and figure out, well, if teacher X has data that shows her students did well, what did she do? So it becomes a conversation with teacher Y and Z, whose students may not have received or had access to or performed as well within that specific benchmark. So those are the conversations going on at the teacher level to try to understand in the unpacking what specifically is happening in the curriculum to make sure kids get access to it, because you can't be successful with it if we don't first provide the access to it. So we're into that depth of the conversation, including, and we're looking at essay writing. Okay, it's one of my questions, and Scott and Jess are in the audience, but I don't think we know right now from the state. The essays can be artificially scored or human scored. I don't know that we know which ones are when in each year. Do we? Do we have that yet?
There are.
All of them? Yeah. So that's also something else that we compare with other school districts because we've done deep dives, and I'll just use elementary and Scott's here, where we've looked at specifically strands for informational text and or what would be happening and how kids are doing it, to actually put writing elements and prompts in place to ensure kids understand what are those components and what should you be illustrating in the quality of the essay, to understand what high quality looks like within the rubric scoring itself, so kids understand what the expectations are. But overall, outstanding results. There's still opportunities, as I mentioned, so that's where it goes back to owning our R. We're responsible to identify those opportunities. But I would just highlight, because Katie talked about it, chronic absenteeism is where part of it starts, because some of those students are then our daily double or trifecta kids in the school district, that if you don't come to school, you can't perform. And then you could also be a student that's receiving intervention services, and you might be ELL, and you might be economically disadvantaged or an IEP at the same time. So all those things get compounded, and it all starts with coming to school. We need help coming to school. Questions and comments for a report card before we get into benchmarks?
Actually, you answered most of my questions. But thank you. I know this was a really long presentation. I'm sure you're very tired from standing up there this long.
All good.
But it's also a good reminder. I mean, this is why we're here.
Absolutely.
So it's fine that we take this time. I guess let's stay on the chronic absenteeism for a second. I just out of curiosity, you mentioned someone who decides they're not coming till 10 a.m. Chronic absenteeism, that would include kind of excessive tardiness?
Yeah.
So absenteeism does not mean you skip the day. It just means you're showing up late, regularly,
It
or
all
missing class.
counts. Everything counts.
So is it hours then?
In the calculation, yes.
Is it something you see showing up in August and September, or is there a cycle to it? Or do you know early on if someone is likely to be?
We already have, as I shared at the summer leadership retreat, all buildings got a list of their chronic, I mean, a lot of them were already familiar, but the cumulative report for the year of all of their chronic absenteeism students. And so a lot of them made very intentional plans for greeting kids and reaching out to them. And we do have some students, unfortunately, in the district that there is a pattern of behavior over the last few years. And so I am aware of several buildings where they are already reaching out to families. It definitely worsens later in the year, but there are already students that are on.
But there are patterns, and that's what we identify. So a student, once you become chronically absent, you really become a repeat offender for us year over year. It just becomes an accepted practice that we have to work to try to break so that it's not an accepted practice. Because you're losing multiple days of learning every single year, and it impacts you cumulatively. Even going back to like when we look at the end result for 2025, we're going to be measured in really college, career, and workforce and military readiness. All of this compounds to lead to that end result, because it's number of AP courses you have access to. It's the number of ACT, what your ACT, SAT scores are. Are you military ready? All the different components that the state's broken down, you can track that all the way back to lower level grades and your attendance pattern, and what the cumulative effect is that over your lifetime when you get to the high school, and trying to get parents to understand in our partnerships through the buildings, the teachers, school counselors, and administrators, the ultimate impact that's happened to your child.
Is the example you gave of students coming in late, is that one of the big issues?
Can't
Tardiness
push them
is
to-
huge at the secondary level, yes. The other thing, candidly, because of our school district, we have several families that will leave early for vacation. So we'll have vacation periods. All those absences count towards chronic absenteeism. So, and it's not that I want to not tell families to do that. I want them to have family time, but we need them in school. We're in school 178 days. We need kids at school.
Can these kids who are chronically late, especially at the high school level, can they take study center first so that that's all they miss?
No, we cannot build schedules to give everybody first
Sorry.
period and last period off. I can't do that. No.
I would just echo that too, that good attendance behavior and pattern starts early at the Central Ohio Attendance Network. They put up statewide data, and where chronic absenteeism is the worst across the state is high school, but also K1. And so that was a little bit surprising to me at first. And obviously the student can't control, they're either taking a bus or the parent is getting them here, but it's important to remember that those are foundational years too, and those are very, very important. And research shows that the attendance patterns you start in K and 1 often continue. You're building those patterns of behavior early. And so I just want to echo, it's important across the board.
So first of all, I think this is a very big problem. Whether you're a fan of Woody Allen or not, he gets credit for the saying that 90% of life or 90% of success is just showing up. And there's just a lot of truth to that saying. Several weeks ago, I have a friend who's a school psychologist in a public school in another state. And she commented, I asked what the biggest challenge she's facing. And the first thing she said was, we have an absenteeism problem. Like, really? And I was surprised because it's another affluent district. And I was surprised that was the case. And she said that families got out of the habit over the last several years for a variety of reasons of not making it a habit to have their kids in school on time every day. And it's a habit. And once the habit's broken, it's hard to get back into a better habit. But it matters. It really matters a lot. And their numbers were exactly the same, right around 10%. And 500 kids are late or absent from school regularly, and it's a problem. So we can make excuses, we can come up with all the reasons, but at the end of the day, the habits were broken over the last few years. It's not because of illness, because I've asked those questions. It's not because of whatever people might say. It's just people got out of the habit. And so whatever we can do to re-encourage and remind families that it just is important for kids to get in the habit of being in school every day.
I agree, and it's definitely an area of focus in all 5 areas.
A few other questions. So one of the raps that we hear periodically about the state testing is that we teach to the test. Now, I've been here long enough, because I'm going on my 13th year working in the district and in one capacity or another. And I know we have lots of other tools. You glossed over it at the beginning of the presentation, understandably, because you had to focus on this. Would you mind sharing with us and sharing with the public just some of the other resources that you use to help make sure that we know how kids are doing all through the school year?
Yeah, as I stated earlier, this is one piece of the puzzle for us. And obviously there's significant legislation and it's in the report card, in the paper and everything else, but it's just one of many tools. So especially let's just start at the elementary. So at the elementary level, we have Acadians and reading and math that we start with in our preschool and goes all the way up to 6th grade. We do that 3 times a year. We're looking at things like oral reading fluency, accuracy, phonemes, all kinds of basic skills. And then for students who maybe show that they are below benchmark in that, it can be used as a progress monitoring tool as you are providing intervention to the student in small group to make sure you're seeing that upward trend on specific skills. In the area of math for Acadians, it has things like beginning quantity determination. There's just different strands and skills that are so foundational. And so in grades pre-K through 6, we are absolutely doing that multiple times over the course of the year. Some of our students that need more intense intervention use something called Ames Web, which is another deeper dive into reading fluency. As you start to move up, we use NWEA MAP in grades 2 through 8, as well in 9th and 10th grade. We give that in reading and math, as well as science at certain grade levels. That's a nationally normed test. We give that multiple times a year as well. We want to see what students' strengths are so we can build on those and also look at areas for opportunity. And we never want to just use one data point because students sometimes they're human. They can have a bad day, not be feeling good. So we really want to see patterns in that data. We use the data warehouse Performance Matters. And so what's great about that is you can pull up your class and you can see their Acadians, you can see their NWEA MAP, their OST, their PSAT score at the high school, their AP scores. There's some district-created assessments that are available as well. Teachers use their high-quality student data, which is part of the Ohio Teacher Evaluation System. So there's common assessments at different grade levels and standard areas. So we are just using all different kinds of data to really pinpoint what our students need to work on so that we have that whole picture and not just one slice.
Is it safe to say that the robustness of our data room, and again, we've had these conversations before, but it's worth reminding every year.
Yeah.
Is it safe to say that it's hard for students to fall through the cracks in terms of what individual teachers know about student performance and where they are and where they might need help?
100%. We have an incredible team of administrators and teachers. There's a lot of them sitting here tonight, and they are highly invested in that. They're looking at it often because they care deeply about our students. It kind of goes back though to that attendance piece. We can have all the data in the world, but if you're not sitting in front of us to get your triple dip of intervention and classroom instruction, then we can't provide that. So we definitely need our students here, but absolutely, we have incredible tools and information at our fingertips to really personalize and support our students.
Well, and candidly, you can look at the data and just by looking at the results, even on this, that it works because in the gap closure, which would be the kids that are at risk, all subgroups met the gap closure requirements in ELA and math, which shows they showed growth, and we'll see the same thing in the progress metric that will come out in September. We anticipate it will illustrate the same, but to do that, we need you to be here. So if I'm struggling in reading and I get triple dipped because I need help in reading, then that has to happen when you're at school. So if you don't come to school, we can't triple dip you during the day to help you with reading.
Agreed. I mean, so I think the progress is notable, and as Superintendent Sawyer has pointed out, it is worth celebrating. When we see the kind of progress, it is worth celebrating. I think it's also important that we take a clear view and recognize we are still behind where we were pre-pandemic. Okay, and it's going to continue to take time, but that's the consequence of what happened during the pandemic. Kids are behind. As you pointed out, we have these cohorts going through, they missed school. And it is hard to
30% of our kids stayed home. They did school, but they did school a different way.
So it's showing up in the data. It's very, very clear. And we have to be aware that it's hard to recover. Remedial education is hard and doesn't have a very good success rate. So the fact that we have a pretty good success rate is notable and is worth celebrating for sure.
There's a lot of national studies that I've been following as well. I mean, this is a national issue, not just a local issue. And that research is showing that at the early grades, recovery is moving faster than at some of the middle grades. Where students were kind of invested in that in some of their foundational years. So a lot of the research I've read recently says that for students to get caught up, it could take 2 to 4 months of additional instruction. And so we did use a lot of our ESSER funds this past summer to provide some summer support in reading and math for students and families that we identified. But obviously it's important that we are really intentional in our actions in providing those interventions.
And just one more comment on testing. And one of the other raps about testing is that we should be helping kids think critically, but I think it's also important to recognize that you cannot think critically about things you do not know. You simply have to have foundational knowledge. You need to know how stuff works before you can think critically about how maybe it'll work better. So there's no substitute for quantitative assessment that actually digs in to understand what students actually know. And so I give your team, Superintendent Sawyer, a lot of credit for continuing to focus on this. It's important, and I certainly appreciate it.
The comments related to the report card before I start benchmarks.
Can I just ask a follow-up to some of Phil's questions? So just to be really clear, so when we disaggregate data, we disaggregate to the student level.
100%, yes.
And so, for example, math, if we find a gap with a student, that information goes with the student we don't lose track of it.
Correct.
Yeah.
100%.
And that's part of why all this testing is so important. So we, and like you said, a kid can have a bad day, so you need multiple data points.
Right.
Outstanding job to everyone involved, and we are trending back toward pre-pandemic, so congratulations and excellent results.
Congratulations.
So Katie, stay there in case we have to tag team on something specific, but we're going to transition to the benchmarks for continuous improvement plan. So you're going to see markup. This is the 2022-23 becoming 23-24. There was a sunset provision in here because it was dated for September of 23. So I've updated it and you can read the strike throughs, but simplistically, I'm recommending for 2023-24, it just becomes shortened to become the New Albany Plain Local School District is committed to creating a culture of accountability that achieves the best academic and development outcomes for each student. That is the statement of purpose. The district aspires, no time bound, the district aspires to become and remain the best rated public school district in the state of Ohio. Because of the changes in the report card, the changes in the PI, there are no longer rankings available. Everything that comes out in that way from the department is unofficial. So it's just spreadsheet data. There's no official anything like that. So that conclusion that is drawn by us based upon an Excel spreadsheet that may or may not be available from the department. There are no rankings permitted under state statute. So all of that changed with the A to F letter grade system. So you would be rated the 5 stars. That's the only comparison piece that I can make it. So using last year as an example, we would have been one of 12 school districts in the state had we received the overall 5-star rating. It wasn't available, but there were only 12 school districts that had 5 stars in all of the components, which would have translated into a 5-star rating. That would make us tied for number 1. There is no other spread. There will be a spreadsheet most likely that will be accessible that'll have everyone's information in it, but it's not a ranking system that's issued by the state officially. There is no such thing. It doesn't exist under state statute.
So how are we going to define best? Number 1?
You defined that.
I know we did.
It's in the definition as number 1.
Okay.
So we might be tied, but it's still number 1. Short of going back and changing, the board adopted statement of purpose. That's where it's at.
It's number 1.
That's it. So I think this achieves that, but it eliminates the conflict that's currently under state statute that no longer exists. The local report card system, this was what Katie mentioned, just to remind you, there's 5-star ratings. 5 is the highest. I believe there should be more than 5 because we would probably be 5.5, but we are not allowed to have that because our PI was 96.2. 90% or above is a 5-star. So 90% is the threshold to earn 5 stars. For benchmark number 1, when you go back to, that's the overall report card system. Katie already shared it with you. Again, the progress component will come out in September when we receive it officially from the department. Benchmark number 1 for 22-23 was to earn the performance index score greater than 95%. That was the academic achievement goal that was established by the Board of Education. It's adopted as part of the continuous improvement plan. It becomes the academic achievement goal for all employees within the school district from an accountability perspective. We selected 95% to hold ourselves accountable to something greater than the minimum standard. So although 90% is 5 stars, we went to 95% with the aspiration of continuous growth for kids. And I will just be candid, and I've said this multiple times, and people can go back and see me say it year over year. It's very difficult to achieve. Each cohort of students moving to the next grade level is a new cohort of students that are moving into new grade level content or requirements within the benchmark standards for what's required. So our PI was 96.2. Katie mentioned that. We don't believe it will change, but never know with the department, something else could happen. It will be official in September. So for 2023-24, I'm still recommending we hold ourselves to the higher standard. 90% is 5 stars. In my world, we should shoot for the 5.5 stars that don't exist and say we'll be 95% or greater on the performance index. For benchmark number 2, it's for the year's worth of growth within instruction. This is the progress measure. We said 4 stars or higher on the local report card. We don't have access to this data yet. Not knowing what the data is, we'll revisit this in September when we come back and talk about the adoption of the CIP. Right now, I'm saying keep it the same because I don't know what the data is. We suspect it's going to be 5 stars based upon what we can see, but it's not officially released by the department, and we can't see what the growth data is for value-added purposes. That is not released until September. So we'll come back to this, but right now, I recommended it stay the same. For benchmark number 3, again, this isn't final, although we exceeded the gap closure and met the gap requirements in ELA and math and all grade levels. It's not official until it comes out in September from the department. So we can't officially say that we've met benchmark number 3 because there's a progress component that's still tied to gap. So there is still something left in the gap area. So because that data is not released, I'm saying wait till September. And for right now, I've just said the same thing. 4 stars are greater, depending on what the release is in September, to tell us if there's a specific area that we need to pay attention to. For benchmark number 4, Katie shared with you the graduation rate component for the class of 21-22. Again, report card's always in arrear. And remember, because we get this question a lot, when someone sees that New Albany High School's graduation rate is not 100%, in the first week of October, they will count the number of 9th graders. If the same number of 9th graders do not walk across the stage 4 years later, if you move to Timbuktu, Tahiti, or out of the country or to a different state, you count against us in the graduation rate. That's why no one ever has 100% in graduation. It's just how they calculate the cohort. You enter 9th grade, you must walk 4 years later within the same school district. It's just how the state calculates it. I totally disagree with it. I think it's crazy, but it's not ours to decide. But we meet that. We're very strong in that. You're actually going to see I'm recommending we change it. Students in the class of 2023 taking the SAT will earn a mean score that's 20% higher. We will not see that until most likely also in September, early October. That information will be back. We don't have it yet. And then lastly, it's to administer the PSAT to all 8th graders. We did do that last year. We intend to do it this year, and the SAT to all juniors during the 22-23 school year. We did do that last year, and again, we intend to do that this year. We give kids access to it. For benchmark 4, I'm recommending changing the graduation component from 4 stars to 5. And the or greater actually will get deleted, so that's a typo. So Katie and I looked at this 1,000 times, and I just looked up and I see it now. So you can't get higher than 5. 5 is it, 5 stars. Students in the class of 24 will take the SAT. Right now, I left it the same for 20% higher than the average because I don't know what our data is. That won't happen until September, October. And then administer the PSAT to 8th graders and the SAT to juniors. We have to declare with the state. We do have a choice. It's ACT, SAT. We select SAT based upon student participation rates to take it at school for free. Benchmark number 5, actually, I'm recommending a change for 2023-24. However, for 22-23, we met administering age-appropriate surveys to students to make sure they feel safe, supported at school, have at least one person at school for trusted adult and effectiveness of specific programs. And then we also talked about implementing age-appropriate programs, including the R factor and building inclusive campus culture initiatives for what we specifically did with the adoption of the BIC framework to continue our efforts to enhance school and district climate. Those were met based upon the benchmark goals that were in the BIC framework for 2022-23, as well as the student surveys that would be administered. We do intend for 2023-24, I'm combining benchmark 7 and benchmark 5 together because of what they represent in relationship to school culture. So we're making the CIP one goal less, but it's being incorporated into benchmark number 5 to enhance school culture, social emotional well-being, and stakeholder satisfaction. So we will administer age-appropriate student surveys. Katie, want to say which ones they are?
We're going to do the belonging survey as we did last fall in grades 1 through 12, and the substance use survey in grades 7, 9, and 11. We also do the staff climate survey.
Right. And we brought those in-house. Those were the Hanover longitudinal surveys that we now do in-house through Qualtrics ourselves. So we have the ability to create that using the same platform that Hanover is using for the Qualtrics system. So Katie facilitates that process in cooperation with the building principals. So those would be the student and staff surveys that we would administer for 2023-24. And then in response to the last board meeting, the discussion with the Board of Education that President Kalinowski and I followed up on as we were directed to do was to implement strategies to increase engagement of parents with children enrolled in our school district based upon parental survey results. So the two examples that President Kalinowski and I are recommending to you, and again, they're just examples, you're welcome to come up with other solutions, are coffee and conversations with Board of Education members to try to engage with our parent population based upon the parent survey results that you discussed last month as one of your goals. And then the second piece is you establish a new board committee for citizen advisory for student belonging that you've appointed parents to within the school district specifically. President Kalinowski and I both believe that also fits in with the goal of increasing engagement with parents to understand specifically student belonging, but at the same time also engaging with the board on what matters most to parents, their experiences within the school district, educational programming, extracurricular, co-curricular activities, everything that was in the parent survey results that you discussed last month. So President Kalinowski and I believe that that could become part of benchmark 5 to be responsive to your discussion at last month's board meeting. Benchmark 6 is fiscal. And I know people ask me this, that annually we haven't changed this goal from 1%, but we've met it for 2022-23, and it's based upon line item 4.5 of the 5-year forecast for total expenditures. So for 22-23, we did meet that. I'm recommending, as is Ms. Jenkins, who's not here tonight, but Mrs. Gerhart is, and she can assist me in conversation, depending on what your questions are related to finance. That we maintain at least a 1% reduction in the school district. And last year, because after Becky did the end of the year report at your May, she presented in May, we were in June fiscal year close, and July and August, she gave you the final updates for where we ended. We ended significantly above the 1% reduction, and the majority of that was in personnel for positions that we just did not fill. So Becky and I would recommend to the board, okay, there could still be positions we may not fill, but that's not our focus on the budget piece. We work with building administrators and cabinet members and all the administrators in the school district, and many of them are sitting here tonight as principals. We go through a pretty laborious process related to the budget, and we justify what we're spending. We have line item budgets that are prepared by building administrators with their directors that go through a budgetary process within the school district. We actually understand where we're spending money. And if we line item something that they ask for and it's not spent, we ask questions. Well, why wasn't this spent? Was it not necessary? Did we do it a different way? And then as we prepare the budget in March for the next school year, that's when budgeting actually occurs within the school district, we still go through a justification process to actually talk about where we're spending the money, and specifically what's the purpose of spending that money. So building principles have become adjusted to the process to understand that you just don't show up with a blank sheet of paper, and you're going to show up with a pretty robust spreadsheet. Sheila's laughing because the same thing happens at the department level, to understand where we're spending money in the school district, because it's not about just spending the money for the sake of spending the money. There's a justification process that goes in place that's pretty laborious. But I think it's good for the school district because we still need to prove to our taxpayers that we are fiscally responsible and how we're spending money within the school district. And we typically have a net savings in total expenditures because principals now understand when we get to April, you don't just hurry up and spend it for the sake of spending it, because we're going to question everything that comes in, because if you can't justify it within that fiscal year, Monica's that person, then you don't get to buy it because we're not spending the money. So it's a pretty robust process. I will tell you, we look like year over year, we far exceed this goal, but it's mostly because of personnel. Put personnel in the timeout box. Let's just go back to daily operations. We will look at electrical bill, gas bill, utility expenses, how we're consuming water, the lights that are left on, the LED conversions, where we haven't done that, what's the electrical bill look like, which light switches are left on, which wings are on for security purposes. We've really gotten into the detail of trying to understand what else can we do in this school district to generate some type of savings to benefit the Joe taxpayer. So I would recommend we keep this goal, even though it looks like we keep meeting it. There's actually a lot of effort that goes into meeting this goal. This is not easy to do if you take personnel and the people that we did not hire, because we've had 2 years of several vacancies that we just could not find people to work in food services, to drive school buses that were part of our original total expenditure that we got credit for, but I would say put them aside. Benchmark 7 is the one I'm proposing, actually is eliminated. It gets combined with benchmark number 5. However, for 2022-23, ensure community engagement and stakeholder satisfaction. You said that you wanted to administer a parent staff survey to measure satisfaction with educational quality, school culture, communication, student services, climate, or fiscal management. So there was a staff survey that we do for staff climate that we actually take very seriously and unpack as an administrative team during the summer to try to understand the feedback that's given to us by our faculty and staff, and then what we can use that for continuous improvement. And then you did complete the parent survey. To the best of my knowledge and speaking to President Kalinowski, there's no intent currently to administer another survey related to parents because we just completed one. So we believe the action plan that's associated to this that could be implemented as a result of the parent survey you did is actually back in benchmark 5 to actually take the survey results and do something with them to further engage parents within our school district, however you see fit. The focus, I said, should remain the same. All employees will be accountable for implementing research-based practices, including a rigorous and aligned curriculum, common assessments, focused instruction, and data-driven decisions to achieve our statement of purpose, the best academic and developmental outcomes for every student within a fiscally sustainable budget. So I do not recommend we should change that in the CIP based upon the definitions that were created by the Board of Education. And then as we look towards 2023-24, people ask us, well, how are you going to do all of this? And I think it goes back to, it's the continuation of the clarity of our purpose. We talk about this beginning with opening day, a convocation with faculty and staff and what we're specifically doing. We have delivered and defined actions based upon the value system. So it's the value statement that was adopted by the board that contributes to the Building Inclusive Campus Culture framework that exists within the school district. The guaranteed and viable curriculum that's board approved and adopted across the school district that's rigorously implemented by our teachers and looking at the standards aligned curriculum. So it's not a mystery on the what. We absolutely are clear on what the what is within the school district related to the curriculum. The art or pedagogy of the teacher is the how they bring it to life for kids. We don't dictate that. That's the art of being a classroom teacher. We do have conversations to try to understand that if someone's doing something that might actually be incredible, we need to understand that to see if it can influence others because of the benefit to students. But we entrust our teachers as professionals that that is their responsibility. So the what is defined, how they make it happen becomes the art within the classroom. That's why we hired them to be teachers. We evaluate students for intervention and enrichment opportunities. Katie talked about many of those tonight in the data presentation. We monitor the progress regularly. So there's multiple things that happen throughout the school year to hold us accountable to see if we're meeting the needs of those kids. We talk about ongoing classroom walkthroughs. So we actually give feedback for what we're actually seeing happening daily within classrooms across the school district. We're very data focused. Katie gave many examples of what we're using the data warehouse for on a daily basis. All of that comes back when you talk about student achievement, student growth, and student well-being. It's through the integration of the supports that we're doing with the why, the how, and the what within our school district. The why is the statement of purpose, the value statement ultimately to ensure that we're fostering the environment of kindness, dignity, and respect. It's balanced by our 6 disciplines of the R factor to try to help empower students to make the positive choices necessary to influence a positive outcome. And then the big framework to ensure that we're safe, supported, and connected across the school campus. We do have the powered partnerships with our parents. We can't do this alone. So parents are the partners in the educational process. You've actually empowered them through your Board of Education policies, and we set high expectations. And fortunately, our kids can rise to those occasions, as can our faculty and staff. It's not easy. This is hard. I mean, this is not easy work. I'm just going to say that it's not. I mean, this is hard work, and there's teachers in this audience and administrators in this audience will tell you this is hard for 178 days, and then what we do in the summer to prepare for it to happen again. Your next steps, so this is your homework, because you have to understand your outcome. You can talk about this tonight, but then you get to reflect on it, because on September 18th, this comes back with the presentation of the progress data, because we'll have that from the department. You only have one board meeting in September. There will be a recommendation currently on that agenda to adopt the 2023-24 continuous improvement plan. We are required by contract to notify faculty and staff of the continuous improvement plan academic goal, which historically has been benchmark number 1 before September 30th. So if you do not do that at September 18th, you will be required to have a special meeting to do that prior to September 30th for us to be in compliance with the negotiated agreements, both for plea and for OC, because they both have a September 30th deadline. Questions on the benchmarks or anything else you thought of in report card? Or comments, feedback?
Let's talk about the budget. Let's talk about that 1% for a minute. So it does look like we easily meet it every year. And so I think it's important to just say that out loud. So I appreciate you doing that. 80+% of our budget is salaries, wages, and benefits, right? 83, 84 in that general vicinity, right?
Correct.
So we can't exclude those from the conversation. And it's interesting, when we are unable to fill the positions, are we worse off? Are kids worse off when we're unable to fill the positions? Or do you and your team adapt in ways and redeploy resources and make sure that we accomplish what we need to accomplish even without those people?
So I will tell you, it depends on the job classification. Yes, we adapt. We're going to adjust. We find other ways to do it. And it's typically an administrator will go do something else to try to provide support. The most common example I can tell you where I think it negatively impacts kids is lunch, because we currently have 6 vacancies in food service. When there's 6 vacancies in food service, I don't have the number of cashiers or the number of people on the line to serve the food. Lines go slower. So at the high school, when you have 30 minutes to eat lunch and 800 plus kids go to lunch at the same time to 14 different destinations to pick what you want that day, because there's 14 different choices that you can go to, you still have to stand in a line. When you only have 30 minutes for lunch and you're in line for 20, then you get 10 minutes to eat. If I was fully staffed, you would probably be in line for 10 and you would get 20 minutes to eat. The Froyo line, which is an option, it's not a requirement, is longer. That's always staffed because the kids would lose their mind if we close Froyo. But I will tell you, on a day we're really short in food services, we close Froyo. It's not open because I have to put the person on the line because I have to serve the food first. So we will juggle. Administrators in the school district go serve lunch. It's just what has to happen because we have to make sure we can get kids through and still have 30 minutes available for secondary students. At the elementary level, same thing, but they want to go outside to recess. So, and we want them to go outside to recess unless it's pouring down rain, but we want them to go outside to recess. So there's a negative impact to kids, mostly within food services. In the custodial department, when I'm down, we'll restructure. We'll send one person from one building to another building. We increase their square footage for the night. Will it be the cleaning that we normally require? No, but we will do the essentials that are necessary to get us through that night until the next day. So it's still safe for kids, but it's not our way. We will come up with a lesser way for that evening because I am short 3 custodians who are absent from work on second shift because that's when cleaning occurs.
At the end of the day, that's what matters, right? We spend money to make sure that that we're able to educate kids and serve kids the way we say we're going to. So we can't exclude salaries, wages, and benefits of the people here because that's where most of our budget goes to.
It is.
I think you kind of glossed over it a little bit, and I think it's worth reminding people just how different this school district is and how from others, and how different it is than it used to be. So you talked about justifying even current expenses. In most organizations, and certainly most government organizations, budgets start with where you are and add to. So a reduction in growth is considered a spending cut. When it's not a spending cut, it's a spending increase. Here, your team does what is known as either first dollar or zero-based budgeting, meaning we start with spending nothing and build up how much money we have to spend to accomplish our goals. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a targeted goal that can be communicated to the building admin. I'll just use the principals as an example, that based upon our budget, we'll look at, we may know a targeted goal behind the scenes, and sometimes we'll do a reduction of that goal, but it still comes in, to your point, at the zero base. When Ken has to do multiple pages of spreadsheets with his team, his department chairs, and Dr. Mamias before we ever see it, that he has to list line item, every single thing that they're going to purchase to justify that dollar amount, so that we understand where the money's going to say yes or no to it.
And every position.
Yes, and then when a vacancy occurs within the school district, because through the master scheduling process, it's why it starts in January. When students at the secondary level register for high school courses, and as an example, we do staffing and we approve the number of sections for each specific course that then translate into the number of teachers within that specific department, would then translate into the number of teachers necessary at the high school. And if it's less for 2024-25 than it was for 23-24, Ken doesn't just get to keep those people. Those people might be needed somewhere else in the school district, or we may be overstaffed. And then there's a process in place if we're overstaffed as to what that means. We wouldn't just keep people for the sake of keeping people because of the expense to the taxpayer.
And so while it may look like we easily meet the 1% reduction, the budget on which that 1% reduction is based is already a challenged budget, right? It's already been through the ringer. Ken's already done his, 4 dozen spreadsheets and been told no 3.5 dozen times, something like that, right? And so the 1% comes from operational choices that are made over the course of the year to do even better than the budget. Is that fair?
Yes, and then I would add to that, that's the building base. And then it comes together as a school district where we meet with building principals and central office administrators. And we talk about, okay, here's the total landscape so that everyone understands what's happening pre-K through 12. And these are the things that are have to have. So I use Sheila's as an example. Based upon, because there's specific rules you have to meet associated to the number of students within specific disability categories for special needs, that then dictate staffing levels. So Sheila will come to the table and say, here's my ELL population, here's my autism population, these are my grade levels. We look at that across the whole school district, so every principal understands that with the directors, and then people are staffed accordingly. But if she's up, I can't deny services for students with special needs. That will go to the top of the list. So that has to happen automatically. But if Ken has something that he believes based upon the data needs to happen at the high school, is that a have to have or a nice to have? Right now, it's a nice to have until you sit in the room and justify the fact with all the other administrators involved in that process that your priority is higher than Teresa's second grade teacher. And can you prove the data that justifies that? That's what we do as a team. It's a very robust process, but it's a great process because we're focused on meeting the educational needs of kids and justifying it based upon data. It's not an emotional conversation. It's a data-driven conversation. And they will tell you it's a pretty rigorous process. They're all shaking their heads, and it's not because I said that. It is, but it's a good process because at the end, it benefits kids. And we've done it, to your point, within the budget to demonstrate we're being fiscally responsible. We don't spend money for the sake of spending money in this school district. I don't let that happen, and Becky doesn't let that I will tell you, I've been places, that's easy to do. We don't do that. Not best for kids and it's not best for our school district. That's what got us in trouble in 2013. And that's not happening on my watch.
I just want to add a comment that I think I speak for the entire board when we say, you know, sometimes you can make this look easy, but we know there is so much work that goes into achieving all these goals every year. And getting the kind of report card we received this year, it's all the blood, sweat, and tears of every day that each of you contributes to leading into excellence for our school district and our students. So I just want you to hear that from the board, that we recognize this is hard work. You guys just make us look good.
People here work hard.
Yeah,
They do. I don't care what your job is, you work hard.
so thank you. Any other comments, questions on the CIP? All right, so we're moving into curriculum updates.
Dr. Mamias, Mr. Emery, please. I'm getting there, I promise.
President Kalinowski, Vice President Newmoff, and members of the board, thank you for allowing Dr. Mamias and myself time this evening to provide you with a brief update about our programs for this upcoming school year. Next slide, thank you. To begin, we want to revisit the curriculum planning slide. This 5-year outline helps us with future planning and budgeting for new materials. However, we always appreciate the board's flexibility when we need to revisit the planning cycle due to changes at the state level. For this school year, we will be focusing on English language arts, which I will discuss more in depth in a moment. We also plan to get a head start on science with the committee being led by Dr. Mamias, as well as some changes to our health and wellness programming. Dr. Mamias will discuss those with you in just a few moments. Next slide, please. The state's budget bill, House Bill 33, passed during the summer and included the requirement that all districts must choose an English language arts comprehensive program, as well as an intervention program from a state-approved list. This program list must be in alignment with the science of reading research. These instructional materials are required to be used with all Ohio students by the beginning of the next school year. Fortunately, this is the year in the 5-year cycle we're planning to look at ELA programs. I'm attending a session with the Ohio Department of Education where we hope to get clarity this week on when this list may be available and whether or not the approved program list is focused only on the elementary grades. To make sure we stay ahead of the curve, our K-12 structured literacy coordinator, Tara Bogo, is already accumulating materials and scheduling meetings with vendors. These programs will likely be on the state's list based on our review of other states who have similar laws. In addition to House Bill 33, the state's dyslexia law for reading screening goes into full effect this school year. Fortunately, our past practices with reading screening exceed what the state requires for all districts this year. While the dyslexia law states that parents of grades 4 to 6 must have the right to request fall screening, in New Albany, we assess all elementary students every fall without the need for parents to request it. Principal Ballinger informed her parents in her newsletter today that all of her students at the intermediate school will be screened and do not require a parent request. A change this year, however, will be with parent notification. While we've always provided parents with a reading improvement and monitoring plan if their child's scores were of a concern, we will now add language more specific to dyslexia in those cases where the results suggest additional reading intervention and assessment are warranted to address dyslexic tendencies. Last school year, I shared at several group meetings about changes to our elementary school counseling programs. At the February meeting, I shared about the Change Makers school-wide program, which we will now begin using this fall in the K-3 grades during the counselor's monthly classroom visits. The K-3 counselors at Principal Livero and Principal Smith schools have sent newsletters this month to all of their families to keep them informed of their classroom lessons. And we're excited to have this common resource to bring consistency to our early childhood program. At your May meeting, I shared about Senate Bill 288, which includes what is known as Aaron's Law. Aaron's Law in Ohio requires annual lessons in sexual abuse prevention in grades kindergarten to sixth grade beginning this year. I held open houses for parents after the May school board meeting to review the Second Step Child Protection Unit program, which is aligned with Aaron's Law. The counselors and I will now spend the first semester of this year taking the lesson content from the Second Step program and creating our own New Albany program. As per Senate Bill 288, we will make sure our parents review the program content prior to any lessons being taught to their children, so they have the ability to ask questions or even opt out of the program. And I'd welcome the opportunity to provide you an update again when we complete our work later this semester. And that concludes my elementary update. And after Dr. Mamai says, if you have any questions about my content, I'll come back up.
Good evening. Just have a couple secondary updates. As the curriculum map, the 5-year audit shows that this year we're looking at English. All 3 professional development days will be spent with the English teachers, kind of reviewing and doing an audit of the curriculum. We are currently going to look at the vertical alignment within writing. Last year, the middle school did an intensive the writing revolution, and it was writing across the curriculum. And within that, the teachers in all disciplines use writing within their classrooms, and you can see our writing scores increase significantly at the middle school that we are very proud of. We are starting those conversations at the high school, and so we are actually going to be spending our professional development days doing a vertical alignment with writing 7 through 12. So the successes that we've had within the middle school, we're going to move them and open up those conversations in high school as well. The science progressions, we're looking at places where we need to support our students. And if you consistently look at some of our science scores, it's one area that we can always improve upon. And so we looked at the progressions of our science courses and whether or not students are missing content. And so we are starting a review of our current science progressions 6 through 9 to say, what are we doing what's best for our kids? Is there a different progression? Because we currently have students skipping grade levels of content through our acceleration. So can we look at that differently? And so that is a committee we're going to start here in September 12th, teachers, and looking at those science progressions. And lastly, on this slide is the College Credit Plus. So I started the College Credit Plus audit last year, and we did some changes within the CCP courses that we offered on campus. So this school year, we're going to look at a personal finance option, an online option through Columbus State. So our current sophomores are all required to have a 0.5 credit of financial literacy for graduation. So by looking at potential options for that personal finance with a CCP credit, it would be an online course. It wouldn't be something that would be on campus, giving students another option of being able to earn that 0.5 credit. And lastly is explore our math CCP options. So we have a very strong AP pathway for our students that want to accelerate through math. And so we want to look at potential math options or CCP options for our students that may not be on that AP path, right? So can we provide College Credit Plus for students that may not be going into a math or a science field, but need a general math class with CCP, their general ed credits. Not necessarily curriculum related, but I'm really excited about a new partnership with Lead the Way Learning Academy. We are partnering with Lead the Way Learning Academy to come in and provide some career coaching and to provide some opportunities for students to build industry credentials and career apprenticeships for our workforce development. So as Mr. Emery had shared with Senate Bill 288, there are some changes with prevention education. Health education in 7 through 12 is an interesting course, and that there are no state standards for health. Ohio Revised Code actually doesn't allow for there to be state standards. So most of the instruction in health is mandated by the Ohio Revised Code. So I actually pulled what's in the Ohio Revised Code. These are the things that we have to teach in health in 7 through 12. Along with that, the Ohio Department of Education, for some of these, says you have to use specific programs in order to meet the statutory requirement. So you will see in letter C, the venereal disease, we actually bring in an outside program called Common Sense Culture Program, and they come in for 4 days and go through the state requirements to meet the requirement of teaching about venereal diseases. We started this last year, and the curriculum is shared with parents before it happens within health classes, happens at the high school, and there is an opt-out option for that particular unit, those 4 days. Students are given an alternative assignment. That's not done, that's done in another area of the school. Go to the next slide. These are the last 3 areas that are required in Ohio Revised Code. So for the 23-24 school year, health classes at the high school and PE wellness courses at the middle school will be providing developmentally appropriate instruction in dating violence, sexual violence, and child sexual abuse prevention. Wellness teachers will be using the Monique Bird Foundation for Children Prevention Education Teen Safety Matters program. That's a mouthful. The program educates and empowers teens and all relevant adults with information, strategies to prevent, recognize, and respond appropriately to bullying, cyberbullying, all types of abuse, relationship abuse, digital dangers, exploitation, and human trafficking. MFB Teen Safety Matters program has been adopted by Florida, Georgia, California, Colorado, and Utah as an evidence-based program that supports prevention education. The MBF prevention education is a 2-day program that teachers will facilitate. Again, this all information that will be shared with students in the wellness classes in middle school or the health classes in high school will be shared with parents beforehand, and parents can choose to opt out. We also have an opioid abuse prevention that we're required to use called the HOPE curriculum through ODE. And then we also have to teach about making an anatomical gift within the health classes. So in addition, we are doing a prevention model. We are reintroducing sources of strength at both our middle school and high school. So we have a sources of strength club within the high school, and in the middle school, we have 2 teachers that are nominating and working with students during study centers. Sources of strength is a prevention model based on using the strength-based model. So helping students find what are their strengths and how can you help work through adversities by leaning on your strengths. So those are some of the curriculum updates for secondary. If you have any questions for Scott or I, we'll take those now. Katie got it all.
You guys nailed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next are discussion items, beginning with board liaison report. Do we have any liaison reports this evening? With none, we have a second opportunity to discuss or request additional information on the CIP goals before we move into superintendent items. Are there any other questions or? Okay. All right, well then we'll move into superintendent items. They have a motion and a second for superintendent items A through C, please.
Move. Second.
Mr. McClellan and Mr. Darrow, Superintendent Sawyers.
President Kalinowski, members of the board, letter A for personnel, standard employee action items, hiring or resignations, ironically, for people that decided they were not coming back to start the 2023-24 school year who have since submitted their resignations. The other terms and conditions are pursuant to the terms and conditions of the negotiated agreements, both with the teachers union through plea and or through OPSI for the classified staff members that are present. Letter B for general business, standard action items. We are recommending a technology purchase for technology equipment through Think CSC. So that's coming out of PI funds and it's on the approval this evening. In addition to that, we have to annually approve the credentialed evaluators within the school district for OTES purposes for teacher evaluation. So those are on here, as well as an early graduation for a student from New Ulm High School based upon activity. And then lastly, recommendation for donations. We're always very grateful for the philanthropic generosity within our community. Highlight the high school robotics Meta Facebook grant that has been received by the school district. We're very grateful for the competitive application process that we were successful in receiving to benefit our high school robotics program, as well as everything that our parents are continuing to do either within the school district or as community members to support scholarship opportunities for kids. So some of that money comes in after the whole budgetary process happens. So we still have to accept the donation for the scholarships that were issued to students on behalf of those organizations through the school district specifically. Happy to answer any questions you have about the item.
All right, with none, Mrs. Gerhart, please call the roll.
Mr. McClellan,
Yes.
Mr. Darrow,
Yes.
Vice President Newmaw,
Yes.
President Kalinowski.
Yes, and the motion carries. That brings us to adjournment for this evening. May I have a motion and a second to adjourn?
Second.
Mr. Darrow and Mr. Newmaw. Mrs. Gerhart, please call the roll.
Mr. Darrow,
Yes.
Mr. Vice President Newmaw,
Yes.
Mr. McClellan,
Yes.
President Kalinowski.
Yes, and the motion carries. Our next meeting is on Monday, September 18th at 6 p.m. at this location. Thank you very much.